Okay.
So welcome everybody to Parent Talk. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm very grateful for Parent Talk. This season has been wonderful. We've had really great presenters. Tonight is a really special session. It's called Talking to Your Children About Race and Racism. And we have the amazing gift of having Ouida Morrison with the Alaska Black Caucus coming to speak with us tonight. So before we get started, just to share a little bit about THREAD. THREAD is Alaska's Child Care Resource and Referral Network. We offer services to families, early childhood educators, early childhood education programs, and communities all across the state of Alaska. Tonight's session is brought to us by, is funded by the Alaska Children's Trust. And I'm so very grateful for this partner in our community and the work that they do, including supporting us with this amazing season of Parent Talk. So Alaska Children's Trust's goal is to ensure that all Alaska children grow up in a family and a community that provides them with the tools and resources necessary to make their dreams come true. This goal supports their mission to prevent child abuse and neglect all throughout Alaska. Thank you so much to the Alaska Children's Trust for supporting Parent Talk this whole season. So again, it's my great pleasure to introduce Ouida Morrison with the Alaska Black Caucus for our presentation tonight.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I apologize for all the technical difficulties. I'm not sure what was going on. You know, and they say the gremlin comes out sometimes and just disrupts everything. But you know what? We're going to make this happen.
That's right.
So as she said, my name's Ouida. It's Ouida Morrison. It's my last name. I've lived here in Alaska for 30 plus years. I love every moment of it. I always say we have to start out by recognizing and realizing where we're at. So you probably heard of like the Dena'ina Center. We're on the Dena'ina land of the Dena'ina people, and it's the Eklutna tribe just up the road. So we honor that. And so we embrace, all of who we are. One of the fortunate things that I've loved about being in Alaska is we are such a diverse community. We have so much to offer. We have so many people from all over the world, and it has been for quite some time. There's lots of opportunity out there. And so we have to just kind of embrace again the opportunities, I think, and really go out and enjoy ourselves. We do have limited time tonight, so I'm going to preface a couple of things. I will be sending some information. I didn't want to do the slides because it takes a little bit longer to start flipping slides and doing slides. And due to the short turnaround, I want to make sure we get some things covered. So I'm a parent. My daughter, though, is an adult. And since she is an adult, I don't have to do the child talks anymore, but I have actually done that in my life. I've actually, she grew up here in Alaska. She was born in Alaska. So she grew up around a lot of diverse, different people. When she was a little girl, I actually took her to North Star Elementary because North Star had a lot of different diversity going on and a lot of different things going on at that school. It was a wonderful school. It was very much so embracing of lots of cultures, lots of people. They would have different celebrations. So it was a wonderful experience for her to go to North Star. And I wanted that for her. I wanted her to grow up to be not colorblind, as some people sometimes refer to it, but actually we want to be inclusive of people. We want to embrace who we are as individuals, but we also want to be able to embrace others and be accepting of others. So to understand race and where does race, the identifiers, where does that originate? I'm not going to give you a long history lesson, but it does originate back in history. The Office of Management and Budget, which is a federal entity, they actually have definitions for people based on their racial and ethnic makeups. So they identify people as American Indian Alaska Native people, Black or African American people, Hispanic or, people of Hispanic origin, which could be white people of Hispanic origin or Black people of Hispanic origin. And, then they have white, Anglo, and Asian American Pacific Islanders. They have added some other categories now. They've expanded it to multiracial. So people are not as boxed in as they were before. So why do we have these categories, or why did they even start out categorizing people? It started out with categorizing people. And yes, history has not been nice sometimes as far as defining people and putting them in boxes. But we again need to, I think, appreciate and value some of that history. It doesn't mean we're stuck on it, but we have to be real about it too. So, when we're talking about how and what and who understands what when we're talking about racial differences, or we're looking at how does racism evolve? Racism evolves, I think, over power. And sometimes people, again, historically have put people in certain positions to, have power, if you will, over them. When do kids, at what age do they start really recognizing differences? Even at 6 months of age, kids recognize differences. They start to look at skin. They start to look at the different colors. They start to look at hair and hair texture. They really do recognize a lot of things because they're very observant. They're like little sponges. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They're just out of curiosity looking at everybody. As they start to grow, they start to ask questions. Why is my skin tone different than my friend's skin tone? Why is my hair perhaps different than your hair? Even children in the same family sometimes run into asking these types of questions too, because they have siblings that are maybe not quite the same as them. There's differences in their, genders, for example. One might be a little boy, one might be a little girl, and they want to understand that. So curiosity, there's nothing wrong with that. But kids will ask, what do they say? Kids ask the darndest things. They really do. They're very honest, and they will come out and say some things that you are shocked by. At least I was with my daughter, but she was innocent and she would just say whatever it was she felt and whatever she thought. And so she would sometimes want to know questions or ask questions of me, for example. She would say, "Oh, well, why does," for my, her little friend at the time, little girlfriend, she would say, "Well, why does she have straight hair and my hair is not straight?" Well, again, we embrace the beauty of who we are and what we have, and we say, well, that's good. We both have hair, so those are commonalities. Yeah, there might be differences in the fact that one person's hair is curlier, one person's hair is straighter, but we embrace those things with children. We talk to them at their level. So little kids don't ask as much don't need as much information. They just want to know the simplistic way of addressing things. So you address it for them in a simplistic way. It's okay to be different. And then more importantly, for them, I think, to really love themselves, love whatever it is about them. It's okay to be different, but also be inclusive, be respectful of all people, and actually, start having those conversations early. We also have to remember, as the parent, we are their first hero. And so, as their hero or shero in this case, my daughter certainly looked up to me. She certainly paid attention to what I did and how I lived my life. I have a very diverse group of friends. I always have had a very diverse group of friends from all different backgrounds. So that was a normal existence for her. It was not unusual for her to think about people in any other way than, they're my mom's friend, or she played with their kids, they just had fun. Kids, as little kids, have don't have that baggage. I call it the baggage. They don't have the baggage and they don't have the biases. They learn that a lot from us as the parent. And sometimes we innocently say things not thinking about kids actually paying attention to it, but they do pay attention to every word we say. And they will let us know at certain points in time. They may not say it at the moment you say it, but you will hear it again if you say something. But if they get ingrained in them that certain people are not good or certain people are bad, and if it has anything to do with that person's ethnicity or their skin tone or their gender or any other factors, kids actually do observe you and how you behave and what you say. So I was very aware and very consciously aware of not to do certain things. It may come natural, but you don't want to have your child mimicking that, even if they don't say a word at that time. So we all have, again, similarities. We are 99% the same. It's just a few differences. We might have differences in our skin color, eye color, some minor things, but we all have a body. We all have arms. We all have legs. Some of us might not have all of our body parts developed, but it's okay to embrace that and for children to be accepting, again, of all people. and how we start to do that. As they get a little older, of course, you have different conversations with them. You can have more of a advanced conversation, for example. As they grow and they ask questions out of curiosity, it's good to be honest always, tell them the truth, let them experience things. And I say experience. For example, take them to places where they can actually appreciate and value others. Here in Alaska, we've got the Alaska Native Heritage Center right over there in the Muldoon. That's a great place. Bridge builders did, they did this for years. Meet the World in Anchorage at the museum. That's an opportunity to see a lot of different people. If children grow up seeing, experiencing, being integrated, they have no issue with the fact that it's just we're all one, happy, if you will, human race, and they are very inclusive and accepting and appreciating others. My daughter, her friend, they would make lumpia. One of her and her little friends, that was a big deal to her. I know as a child growing up, for me, people that were different than I was so excited to be around them and their family because it was newness and novelty. My house was very boring and they had exciting stuff going on. Now they felt the same way I did. I thought it was exciting at their house. They would be like, well, this is what we do every day. This is boring. So there's a lot around culture. There's a lot around food. There's a lot around celebrations. There's a lot of things here in Anchorage that gives us that opportunity, whether it's singing, whether it's dancing, whether it's different types of celebration. We have the drummers, the Japanese drummers. We have all kinds of opportunities. The Scottish, Scottish Highland games with the bagpipes. It's to be inclusive and to appreciate, I don't know, the Greek festival, Irish dancing. Take your kids and expose them. And they are, kids are sponges. They love it. They enjoy it. But with little old, kids older, as they get older, they're going to start asking questions. They're going to ask questions about things that they see on social media, things that they see perhaps on the news or television. They're going to ask a lot of curious questions. Um, for example, a couple years ago, when Mr. George Floyd was murdered, kids of a certain age, they were old enough to see that, not necessarily understand what was going on, but they were curious about, well, how, and I don't understand. And so, as a parent, you have to try to bring some kind of sense, I guess, sensibility back to it, in some kind of way articulate it to your child. Depending on their age, you think about how to answer that. And you say, as an example, everyone is protected and have protections by the police. I mean, they knew it was a police officer, and everyone is entitled to that. And don't you agree? I mean, you can even get them to say, don't you agree, and get them a little buy-in and say, well, that was something that happened, but certainly it's not to make every policeman is not bad. So you want to make sure that's caveated in there. But that conversation and exchange, depending on the age of the child, it would be maybe at a different level in how you approach it. But don't avoid it. And if you don't know something, I mean, if you don't know, I always tell my daughter, you know what? I don't know. Or I would even say sometimes, let me think about that. Let me think about it. And then we'll have a conversation about it. Tell me what your thoughts are, and we'll share. One of the other things that I did with her, as if there were opportunities constantly. As a matter of fact, she will laugh about it now, and she learned so much. But she said, "Mom, you want me to watch everything?" Well, I did, and I always use television or things that came on PBS a lot, as educational opportunities. So when she would ask me a question about something, I would actually, if there was a program or something that I could show, because we got to think about how visually a lot of people are, and talking to people doesn't necessarily give them the visual. I would screen what I let her watch, yes, but at certain age levels. I mean, she was asking, questions, for example, about Martin Luther King and civil rights. And I wasn't born at that time, so I couldn't really tell her what happened firsthand, but I could tell her stories, but I could also show her video. I would tell her stories from my grandparents or stories from people that I heard that were living at that time. However, I would also let her watch and say, well, here's what it was as far as the March on Washington, opportunities where she could visually actually see that. So the other thing, we have to think about again is how people learn, and different people learn differently. Now, there's a lot of programming out there now, and really good programming. And now that we have all these technology and tools, which I'm going to send you some links and some lists so that you can actually have some things to share with your kids. So PBS did actually they did a good little video about race and about differences and racism and what it is. And it's Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. And it's a little cartoon, kids get engaged with that and they really get into talking about differences. One little girl, she's got braces on her legs. She's got crutches that she uses to walk, and they have different hair, different everything. But I think those are good things for, especially younger kids, because it's entertainment and we have to go where people are at and what will actually make sense to them. But there's a lot of tools available as parents, so you don't have to reinvent or try to come up with something on your own, because there's a lot out there. There's books. Kids love books, or at least mine did love books, but she didn't have all the technology today. But I think books are still a wonderful, wonderful thing for kids. And they seem to have a tendency of wanting to read them over and over and over again, which is good too. It's actually they really get into it. Then they come up with different questions though. Even though they read the same book, a new question sometimes does come out of it, and then discussion. So reading the book with your child, having the discussion with the child, and saying, well, what did you think about that? It also helps them to be critical thinkers as they grow up. They get to really think about things, process things, be able to really analyze information to come up with some kind of judgment or decision that they need, for their life. So it's actually good life skills too down the road. So I'm going to tell you a story, and it's going to be an abbreviated version. I don't know how many of you have heard of Jane Elliott. So Jane Elliott is an educator. She is actually still alive, and she did something that was phenomenal during the time in which it happened. It was after the assassination of Martin Luther King in the 1960s, 1968. She lived in Riceville, Iowa. She still lives in Riceville, Iowa. And Martin Luther King had been killed. During that time of education, they did what they called a teepee unit. And so she said that they would build a teepee, she'd make the teepee, she'd make, costumes for the kids. And that was part of the educational process in the late 1960s. But kids came to school, and these are little third grade kids. They were young, fairly young, but not too young. They came to school and they were all asking, they heard about a king dying. And they said, who is that king? They didn't understand. They could not wrap their head around the idea that someone had been shot and killed. So she decided, she thought about it. She says, well, it was because of racism that this person was killed, and she tried to explain it, but they were not seeing it because these are younger children. So she asked them, after she thought about it, she came back and she said, would you like to understand what racism is? And the kids, of course, said, oh yeah. And she says, well, here's what we're going to do. In place of the teepee unit, as they called it back then, she said, we're going to do a little experiment, and I want you to understand, then you will see, you'll be able to feel and touch what racism really looks like. So what she did was she made buffs, if you will, like little I don't know, kerchiefs kind of things to put around their necks. So she says, well, we're going to separate you by blue eyes and brown eyes in the class. And she says, well, blue eyes, are you going to go first? And everybody with blue eyes are, yeah. So they got a certain buff, and they got to put, they got to be the top of the class, if you will. The other group had to wear this buff that labeled them as being on the bottom. Part of the instruction of what she did was she said, and she gave them these instructions. She says, so blue eyes today, you're on top. There's nothing you can't do. You get to go to lunch first. You get to go, to recess first. You get a longer recess. The kids who had been friends, of course, they were all friends together. The ones who were not on top, they became sad. They became depressed. They were sitting there, the reactions, they actually have a film video of this. The kids actually reacted with shock and horror, some of them. They were like, what? Are you kidding me? But long story short, in essence of time, she did this experiment. Kids who had been the best of friends because they were quote unquote on top, they were mean to the other kids. They became all of a sudden mean. They turned on the other kids. They actually said, well, that old brown eye is doing blah, blah, blah. They tattled on each other. And she could not believe how quickly that turned simply because this person who was in the position of authority told them they were on top, told them the rules. So the other part of this is each day she gave them their spelling tests. The kids who were told they were great and wonderful and they were on top, they excel. The other kids did not. They had much lower scores. The following day, it's flipped. They went through the same thing again, same results. I actually got to meet Jane Elliott many years ago and spend some time with her. And I asked her questions about how did you come up with this? She lived in a community, very small town. It was pretty much Anglo-Saxon in the town. But she said when the kids started asking about what racism felt like, she wanted them to feel it. And that was her way of showing them. But as a result of that, as adults, these kids, this is how much it affected them. They grew up. They had a reunion after they grew up, got married, had kids of their own. They had a reunion. They actually said it made a difference in their life, how they approached life, how they thought about people, how they picked a partner, who they allowed in their life. It made such a significant difference as to how they acted and interacted. So it is on. Jane Elliott is on the internet. I know she's in, you can find videos. She's like in her 90s now. And she's done a lot of training in different institutions, but it started out with her classroom. And she said she just could not believe the change in these young people just simply by what they were told and the opportunity to be on top versus the opportunity not. So, excuse me. So, in saying that, I want to give you a few things. I always tell people to think about a lot of things. One, we think about how we get a hold of who we are. We take our own inventory constantly. We look at how and what we do, what we say, who we interact with. I thought about my daughter as raising her to be a productive young adult eventually. I did not look at her. Yes, I babied her some, I did all that. But I also wanted her to be sufficient on her own, independent, inclusive of all people, not to say or think any kind of negativity toward any people or any groups of people. There was an instance when she was about 4 or 5. There was a gentleman walking down the street and she went, ooh, ooh, that man is really fat. Well, that was unacceptable. And we had to have a conversation about that. But kids say what they think. And I was not going to allow her to make a comment. And I said, well, how would you feel if someone called you a name? How would you feel? Think about that man. No, he did not hear you, but I want you to be aware that would have been very hurtful. You don't like people calling you names or picking on you. So those are teachable moments. We take every teachable moment we can, and it's an opportunity for a conversation about things because kids will say things, whether it's meant to be hurtful or not. But at their level, you address it with them about, not to say even something that, again, it may be innocent, but it's a teachable moment and tell them why they shouldn't say it and then let them have some empathy. How would you feel if someone called you something that you were uncomfortable with or that you did not like? So we start early. We start our conversations early. We certainly be mindful because we are our child's role model. And if we have biases, I say we take our own inventory because we all have them to a certain extent. We might have biases that we don't know because we haven't taken the time to sit with ourselves and really think about it. But I say sit with ourselves, get to know ourselves. A lot of times life, I think, moves so fast and so quickly, we don't even know ourselves. Life just happens. So we have to start thinking about, do we have baggage? Do we have bias? And yes, we all do. It doesn't mean that it's a negative bias or baggage, but we should be in touch with ourselves to know. So take our own inventory, consistently. And then we talk with our kids. We have open conversation constantly. The one thing in my daughter, and I only have the one daughter, but my daughter was good about, she would tell on her friends, she would tell on everyone because we have a very close relationship. And if she even did something that was out of order, she would tell on herself because she felt guilty about it and she couldn't live with it. So you want to have that open communication where your children will ask you anything, but will also tell you anything. She had an incident that happened. She was in, I want to say, first grade, kindergarten to first grade, and it was at North Star. A new little boy came to school. Now, North Star, as I told you, is a wonderful school. Principal was fabulous there. She was a wonderful principal. And they celebrated all kinds of, differences and cultures and had all kinds of programs. This little boy came to school. I didn't know about it. My daughter came home. Now, she didn't understand this, but what she said was, this boy called me a bad name. And I said, well, what is that bad name? Could you tell me? And she said, well, yeah, he said that I was brown and he called me a N word. And I said to her, I said, really? I said, well, how did that make you feel? It's a bad thing. So she did not even understand this because I hadn't had that conversation with her about the derogatory term. So she didn't understand that. I said, well, you are brown. Is there something wrong with that? No. I said, you have the crayon box. There's all kinds of beautiful colors in the crayon box. So you just happen to be a brown crayon. That's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. And she was like, no, there isn't. But that other word, somehow she knew it had negative connotation. And we did address it with the school, with the principal, and the principal addressed it with the parents of this young boy. This young boy had just moved to Alaska recently. I found out later. And he had heard this in his household with some of his family members, and it was a word that was commonly used. So again, children will mimic and repeat the things they hear. I didn't blame the little boy. The kid was like 5 or 6 years of age. So how could I say that this 5 or 6 year old came up with this? At some point, I knew he had gotten it from a parent, which is what I explained to my daughter. I said, children don't just pull things out of the air. So he doesn't know even probably what he's saying. And he said it, and yes, it's hurtful to you, but let's talk about it. So we did. We talked about it and we got through it. So the news, social media, all of that now, there's a lot more to think about and I won't say and be concerned about because it is a lot out there. It's a lot of misinformation. It's a lot of information out there. And even when it was just television, I say we as parents have to screen what our children are exposed to. And we have to give them the opportunities to learn what we would like them to learn. So my daughter did not get free reign, even with the television. She got selective information that I decided it was okay for her to have. And I wanted it to be something that was going to be beneficial to her. Yeah, she got to watch some fun stuff. But even if you think about it, even historically, things such as cartoons, some of those old cartoons even have some very negative and derogatory things intertwined in them. One of the newer cartoons, though, speaking of cartoons, Encanto, people are excited about it. There was a little boy that was actually it was going around on social media. He was only about 3, 4 years of age. He saw the picture and he says, that looks like me. And he was so excited. So diversity, inclusivity, having people of all different shades and colors and sizes and inclusion is a wonderful thing because kids are excited to see themselves. And that's great to be able to see themselves. One of the other things that I noticed too as little kids don't have the baggage that some of the older ones do, or maybe as they grow up, because little kids have a tendency of flocking together. I remember taking my daughter to the doctor. She was probably only about a year and a half, 2 years old. And another little kid was there who happened to be, it was actually a little girl, but the little girl was about her same age and she happened to be Anglo. And they kept peeking around at each other. Finally, they kind of scooted closer and closer together. As we're waiting, they kind of met up at some point. They got together and they started playing instantly. So kids really are just happy to see, oh, that's a little one like me. I'm going over there. I'm going to find a way to kind of scoot, scoot, scoot. So kids don't have that baggage. Something I think is real helpful too, as I said, I told my daughter stories. I told her stories of like growing up. And even my grandmother was alive when I was a kid. My great grandmother was even alive, for a period of time as a kid. So even, telling some of the stories and things that they actually endured and the things that they went through, and it was great for her. I had, again, diverse group of friends, all different ethnicities, but also all different ages. So my daughter had surrogate grandmothers here. My mother actually passed away at 38 years of age, and plus my other family is all in the lower 48. So she had surrogate grandmothers here, which was actually a great thing. And so I think too, there's a village, the saying, it takes a village. It really does take a village to raise a child, because you got all these other positive influences, which is a wonderful thing too. And along with the diversity, that's a thing, to be inclusive of all people. So with that, I've said a lot and I know we're running short on time. I'm not going to keep talking. I will send a list and that you all, can get it via email and share it. And I will actually put my information. If you have questions or anything, feel free to email me. You can text me also. And I definitely appreciate your time and the opportunity. And if we have time, and I'll leave that up to the moderator, but if we have time and there's questions you want to ask tonight that I can answer for you, I'll be happy to do that. Or if you want to collect them later and send them to me, that's fine also. Thank you all.
Thank you so, so much, Ouida. This has been awesome. I know we've got 3 people here. And so I'm actually going to stop recording so that if people want to jump off of their camera, they're more than welcome to, so that we can have a conversation.